I'm Ava Moreno, 24 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed hard work always pays off fairly. Then my parents bought my 19-year-old sister Bella a brand new Jeep Wrangler just because she graduated high school, while I worked 3 jobs for 2 years to buy my dream car. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. My sister's excited squeal still echoes in my mind when she saw that shiny white Jeep in our driveway. "Oh my God, Mom, Dad, this is the best surprise ever!" What she didn't know was that I had been secretly helping pay our family's grocery bills for the past year while saving for my vintage Mustang. But here's what makes this story even more unbelievable. I discovered something in my car's glove compartment that changed everything I thought I knew about sacrifice and love. How could my parents' generosity toward Bella actually be connected to a 20-year-old secret about our family's survival? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm buzzed at 4:47 a.m., same as every weekday for the past 2 years. I rolled over in my narrow twin bed, the same one I'd slept in since middle school, and stared at the motivational poster on my ceiling. A cherry red 1968 Mustang with the words, "Dreams don't work unless you do," printed beneath it. That poster had been my North Star through countless early mornings and late nights. I padded quietly through our small house, careful not to wake anyone. The kitchen still smelled like last night's carnitas, and Mom's coffee pot was already programmed to start brewing in 30 minutes. She'd be up soon to pack Dad's lunch and get Bella ready for her summer classes at community college. But by then, I'd already be halfway through my first shift at Sunrise Cafe. My work schedule was color-coded chaos, pinned to the inside of my closet door. Red for cafe shifts, blue for tutoring sessions, green for dog walking routes. The calendar looked like a patchwork quilt of exhaustion, but each colored square represented $10 to $15 closer to my goal. Every single dollar had a purpose, carefully tracked in a worn notebook I kept in my purse. The Mustang lived 3 blocks away in Mr. Rodriguez's garage. He'd been storing it for his late son, Miguel, who'd planned to restore it before he enlisted, and never came home. When Mr. Rodriguez mentioned wanting to sell it last summer, I knew fate was knocking. The car needed work: a new transmission, paint touch-ups, interior restoration, but underneath the dust and dents was pure potential. "She's got good bones," Mr. Rodriguez had told me, patting the Mustang's hood with the reverence of someone who understood that some things are worth waiting for. Miguel always said she just needed someone who believed in her. I believed. God, how I believed. At Sunrise Cafe, the morning rush was controlled chaos. Steam hissed from the espresso machine, while I moved through the familiar choreography of grinding, steaming, and pouring. My manager, Sandra, had promoted me to lead barista after 6 months, which meant an extra $1 an hour and the responsibility of training new hires. "You're like a machine, Ava," Sandra often said, and I took it as a compliment. Machines were reliable. Machines got things done. Between the breakfast rush and lunch prep, I'd dash to the library for my tutoring sessions. 3 afternoons a week, I helped struggling high school students with algebra and chemistry. The pay was inconsistent. Some weeks brought 4 sessions, others just 1. But I loved seeing concepts click in my students' minds. There was something deeply satisfying about breaking down complex problems into manageable steps. "Miss Moreno makes everything make sense," one of my students, David, had told his mother. That endorsement led to 2 more referrals and an extra $40 a week. Evenings belonged to the dogs. My walking route covered 8 regular clients in the affluent Hillcrest neighborhood where houses had perfect lawns and 3-car garages. I'd arrive dusty from the cafe and library, transform into responsible dog walker Ava, and spend 2 hours with animals who offered unconditional affection without expecting anything in return. Max, a golden retriever mix, always greeted me like I'd been gone for years instead of 24 hours. Luna, a dignified German shepherd, walked beside me with the composure of royalty. These dogs didn't care about my secondhand clothes or the fact that I rode the bus to their neighborhood. They just wanted walks, belly rubs, and someone who showed up consistently. My favorite was Benny, an ancient basset hound whose owner, Mrs. Chen, always invited me in for tea afterward. Her kitchen smelled like jasmine and old photographs, and she'd tell me stories about immigrating from Taiwan in the 1960s. "Hard work is like planting seeds," she'd say, refilling my cup. "Sometimes you can't see the growth happening underground, but roots are forming. Patience, mi niña. The harvest comes." Mrs. Chen reminded me of Grandma Lita, who lived with us, and dispensed wisdom through proverbs and perfectly timed hugs. Both women had survived upheavals that would have broken lesser spirits, emerging with grace and unwavering faith in better days ahead. By the time I'd return home each night, usually around 8 p.m., our house would be settling into its evening rhythm. Dad would be on the couch watching telenovelas with Grandma Lita, while Mom graded papers at the kitchen table. She taught 3rd grade at the elementary school where Bella and I had been students. Bella would typically be in her room, FaceTiming, friends, or scrolling through social media, her laptop open to whatever online class she was half-heartedly attending. The contrast in our evening routines wasn't lost on me. While I counted tips and updated my savings spreadsheet, Bella posted Instagram stories about weekend plans and cute coffee shop discoveries. Her biggest concern seemed to be choosing between marketing and communications as her major. I didn't resent her happiness. Not exactly. Bella was naturally sunny, the kind of person who made friends in grocery store checkout lines and remembered everyone's birthday. She'd inherited Mom's teaching instincts and Dad's easy laugh. People gravitated toward her warmth. But sometimes, late at night when I was too tired to sleep immediately, I'd wonder what it felt like to move through the world with such lightness. Bella had never worked a job beyond occasional babysitting for neighbors. She'd never stayed awake calculating whether she could afford both gas and groceries that week. Her biggest financial decision involved choosing between 2 dresses for homecoming. "Mija, you work too hard," Mom would say, whenever she caught me updating my budget or researching Mustang restoration tutorials on YouTube. "You're young, have some fun." But fun felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Every dollar spent on movies or dinner out was a dollar not going toward the Mustang. Every late night hanging out with friends was time I could have been earning. My social life had gradually narrowed to Jordan, my best friend since community college, who understood my drive because she had her own version of it. Jordan was saving for nursing school, working as a medical assistant while taking prerequisite courses. We'd study together at 24-hour diners, quiz each other on anatomy terms while I practiced latte art on paper napkins. She was the only person who didn't make me feel crazy for prioritizing long-term goals over immediate gratification. "We're building foundations," Jordan would remind me during particularly exhausting weeks. "Everyone else is building sandcastles." The Mustang fund grew slowly but steadily. $1,500 after 6 months. $3,000 after a year. By month 18, I had enough for the car itself, but Mr. Rodriguez and I both knew she'd need immediate work to be roadworthy. So I kept saving, kept grinding, kept crossing days off my calendar. When I finally had enough, $6,000 total, the transaction felt almost anticlimactic. Mr. Rodriguez signed over the title in his kitchen while his wife made us coffee and shared stories about Miguel's plans for the car. They were selling it to fund their granddaughter's quinceañera, another family milestone requiring financial sacrifice. "Miguel would love knowing she's going to someone who appreciates her," Mrs. Rodriguez said, pressing a small St. Christopher medal into my palm. "For safe travels, mija." Driving the Mustang home for the first time was a moment I'd replayed in my mind hundreds of times. The reality exceeded every daydream. The engine rumbled with promise. The steering wheel felt perfect in my hands. And the radio crackled to life playing classic rock. I drove slowly through our neighborhood, windows down, feeling like I'd finally earned my place in the driver's seat of my own life. Our driveway had never looked so small or so perfect. I parked carefully, took a photo for my Instagram story, and sat for a moment in satisfied silence. 2 years of 4:47 a.m. alarms had led to this. Ownership of something beautiful, something mine, something that represented every early morning and every late night when giving up would have been easier. That evening, our family gathered around the Mustang like she was a new baby. Dad ran his hands along her curves with the appreciation of someone who understood machinery. Mom took pictures of me behind the wheel, her pride evident in her smile. Even Bella seemed genuinely excited, asking if she could sit in the passenger seat. "She's gorgeous, Ava," Bella said, adjusting the rearview mirror. "You're going to have so much fun with her." Grandma Lita blessed the car with a small prayer and a sprinkle of holy water she kept in her purse for such occasions. "La Virgen will protect you on the roads, mi amor. This car was meant for you." For 3 perfect weeks, the Mustang was everything, I'd hoped. I drove to work instead of taking the bus, arriving with a confidence I'd never felt before. The car smelled like leather and possibility, and every stoplight was an opportunity to appreciate what persistence could accomplish. I named her Carmen, after my great-grandmother who'd walked across mountains to reach the American border with nothing but determination and a toddler on her hip. Carmen the Mustang and Carmen the woman shared the same stubborn beauty, the same refusal to quit when the road got rough. Those 3 weeks felt like validation of every sacrifice I'd made. Here was proof that delayed gratification worked, that betting on yourself paid off, that dreams could become reality through sheer force of will. I should have known that feeling wouldn't last. The Instagram notification appeared while I was restocking coffee beans during the Tuesday afternoon lull. Bella had tagged me in a story, which wasn't unusual. She documented our family life with the enthusiasm of a professional social media manager. But something about the notification made my stomach tighten even before I opened it. The photo showed Bella standing next to a gleaming white Jeep Wrangler, her hands pressed to her cheeks in theatrical surprise. The caption read, "When your parents casually surprise you with your dream car for graduating, I'm literally crying. Love you, Mom and Dad. Chaque blessed, chaque to graduation, chaque to dreams come true. Best parents, barida." I stared at the screen until the image burned into my retinas. The Jeep was beautiful, pristine white with silver accents, still wearing dealer plates. The kind of car you see in commercials with happy families driving toward scenic overlooks. The kind of car that cost more than I'd made in the past 6 months combined. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Friends and family members flooding Bella's post with congratulations and heart emojis. Tia Carmen, "So proud of you, mija." Cousin Sophia, "Your parents are the best." Even Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street. Beautiful car for a beautiful girl. The notification sound seemed amplified in the cafe's quiet afternoon atmosphere. Each new comment felt like a small slap, a reminder that Bella's achievement, graduating, high school, something I'd done 6 years ago with honors, warranted a celebration I'd never received. I closed Instagram and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept circling back to that image. Bella's genuine joy was undeniable, but underneath my shock was a growing realization that felt like swallowing glass. Our parents had never even considered surprising me with anything close to that magnitude. When I'd graduated high school as valedictorian while working 2 part-time jobs and caring for Grandma Lita after her hip surgery, the celebration had been dinner at Olive Garden and a $50 Target gift card. When I'd completed my associate degree while working full-time, Mom had made my favorite cake and Dad had given me a proud hug. Both moments had felt meaningful at the time, proportional to our family's financial situation. But apparently, our financial situation had improved dramatically in the past few years. Enough to casually purchase a $30,000 vehicle for a teenager who'd never held a job longer than 3 weeks. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of mechanical movements. I made lattes and rang up pastries while my brain processed this new information about my family's priorities. Every customer interaction felt surreal, like I was watching myself perform the motions of normalcy while my worldview quietly collapsed. Sandra noticed my distraction during the shift change. "You okay, Ava? You seem a little off today." Just tired, I managed, grateful that the explanation was both true and partial. I was tired, bone deep, soul-level tired of working harder than everyone around me for a fraction of the recognition. The bus ride home stretched endlessly. I usually spent commute time reviewing tutoring notes or responding to dog-walking clients, but today I sat motionless, staring out the window at a city that suddenly felt foreign. San Diego's afternoon light painted everything golden and beautiful, but I couldn't access any of that beauty. The landscape felt like a movie set, gorgeous, but untouchable. Our house came into view as the bus rounded the familiar corner. The white Jeep dominated our small driveway, making Carmen look shabby and old by comparison. My beautiful, hard-earned Mustang suddenly seemed like a child's toy next to Bella's gleaming SUV. I stood at the end of our driveway for several minutes, studying the two vehicles side by side. Carmen's paint had character, small chips that told stories of decades on the road. Bella's Jeep looked like it had been delivered from another planet, a place where everything was clean and new and effortless. The front door opened before I reached it. Bella burst out with the energy of someone who'd been waiting all day to share good news. "Ava, did you see? Can you believe it? I literally had no idea." She bounced on her toes, hands clasped in front of her chest. "Mom and Dad said they wanted to celebrate my graduation, and I thought they meant like a dinner or something, but then Dad handed me these keys and I just started crying." Her enthusiasm was infectious and devastating simultaneously. This was my baby sister, the girl I'd helped with homework and taught to drive in empty parking lots. Her happiness should have been my happiness. Instead, I felt like I was drowning in quicksand. "It's beautiful, Bells," I said, and my voice sounded normal, enough to fool her. "You must be so excited." "I am, but also kind of overwhelmed. Like this is such a huge gift. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and it'll be a dream." She grabbed my arm, eyes bright with joy. "Want to go for a drive? We could get burritos and drive down to the beach." The invitation was pure Bella, spontaneous, inclusive, generous with her good fortune. 6 hours ago, I would have loved the idea of an impromptu sister adventure. Now the thought of sitting in that Jeep, breathing in its new car smell while pretending to be happy, felt impossible. "I've got tutoring in an hour," I said, checking my phone unnecessarily. "Rain check?" "Of course. Oh, but wait until you see the interior. It has heated seats and this amazing sound system," and she continued describing features while I nodded and smiled, performing the role of supportive older sister while my chest filled with concrete. Inside, our parents were in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine and looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. Dad's construction company had been struggling through the pandemic, and Mom's teacher salary barely covered our mortgage and utilities. But tonight they looked like people celebrating a job well done. "Mija." Mom stood up and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and happiness. "Did you see Bella's surprise? Your father found such a good deal at the dealership." "It's incredible," I said, accepting Dad's side hug and trying to match their energy. "She's going to love having her own transportation for school." "That's exactly what we thought," Dad said, his pride evident in his voice. "No more borrowing your car or asking for rides. She'll have independence." The word independence hung in the air like incense. I'd spent 2 years earning my independence $1 at a time, celebrating each milestone in private. Bella had received hers wrapped in a bow on a Tuesday afternoon. "Plus," Mom added, refilling her wine glass, "her grades have been so good, and she's been so responsible about her classes. We wanted to show her how proud we are." I nodded and made appropriate sounds while calculating the cost difference between their gifts to me and their gift to Bella. Even accounting for inflation and our family's improved financial situation, the gap was staggering. More than the money, though, was the spontaneity. They'd planned this surprise, researched dealerships, probably spent weeks coordinating the details. The joy on their faces wasn't just about Bella's happiness. It was about their ability to provide it. When had they stopped seeing me as someone who might want surprising? Dinner conversation revolved around the Jeep. Bella described every feature while Mom and Dad beamed with parental satisfaction. Grandma Lita asked practical questions about gas mileage and safety ratings. I participated when prompted, asked follow-up questions, and helped clear the table afterward like always. But underneath the family dinner performance, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like an outsider in my own home. After dinner, I escaped to my room and called Jordan. She answered on the second ring, and her voice immediately grounded me in reality. "Hey, what's up? You sound weird." "My parents bought Bella a car," I said without preamble. "That's nice. What kind of—" Oh, Ava." Jordan's tone shifted as she processed the implications. She knew about my Mustang fund, had celebrated with me when I finally brought Carmen home. She understood the mathematics of sacrifice in a way that most of our peers didn't. A Jeep Wrangler, brand new, just because she graduated high school. Jesus. I keep trying to be happy for her, but I feel like such a terrible person. She's my sister. I should be celebrating with her. "You're not terrible," Jordan said firmly. "You're human. This is fucked up, Ava. Like, objectively fucked up." Hearing someone else validate my feelings was like opening a pressure valve. I'd been so focused on managing my reaction that I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge how deeply this had hurt. "The worst part is that they looked so happy," I continued. Like, genuinely thrilled to be able to give her this gift. And I realized they've never looked at me that way. Not once. "Because you've never needed taking care of," Jordan pointed out. "You've been taking care of yourself since you were like 16. Maybe they don't see you as someone who needs gifts because you're so competent at getting what you want." The observation was both comforting and devastating. Had my self-sufficiency made me invisible? Had working 3 jobs convinced my parents that I didn't want or need their support? "I don't know how to bring this up without sounding like a jealous bitch," I admitted. "You're not jealous of Bella," Jordan said. "You're hurt by your parents. There's a difference." After we hung up, I lay in bed staring at my motivation poster. The cherry red Mustang still looked beautiful, but the inspirational message felt hollow. Dreams don't work unless you do. But apparently, some dreams get handed to you on a silver platter, while others require years of 4:47 a.m. wake-up calls. I thought about Mrs. Chen's advice about patience and underground roots. Maybe she was right, about growth happening invisibly. But what happened when other people's gardens got watered more generously than yours? Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of white Jeeps and empty driveways. When my alarm buzzed at 4:47 a.m., I hit snooze, for the first time in 2 years. The 5 extra minutes felt like rebellion, a small act of defiance against the relentless machinery of my own ambition. But by 5 a.m., I was up and moving through my morning routine. Coffee beans needed grinding, students needed tutoring, dogs needed walking. The world hadn't stopped for my emotional crisis, and neither could I. The only difference was that now I knew something I'd never known before. Hard work wasn't always rewarded equally, even within the same family. Some people got Jeeps, and others got Target gift cards. The question was what to do with that knowledge. The family photo hung in our living room like a piece of evidence I'd never properly examined. 5 smiling faces arranged on the couch during last Christmas morning, all of us wearing matching red sweaters that Mom had bought on sale at Target. Dad's arm around Mom's shoulders. Grandma Lita perched on the arm of the couch with her hand on my shoulder. Bella and me flanking the group, with identical grins. I'd walked past that photo hundreds of times without really seeing it, but now it demanded attention. Now I could see the subtle dynamics frozen in time. How Mom's hand rested on Bella's knee in a gesture of casual affection. How Dad's smile seemed especially bright when looking toward Bella's side of the couch. How my own posture was slightly turned inward, as if I was protecting myself even in moments of supposed family harmony. The photo had been taken by Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, who'd stopped by to deliver tamales and stayed for coffee. I remembered the morning, how we'd spent 20 minutes arranging ourselves for the perfect shot, how Mom had insisted on the matching sweaters even though mine was slightly too small and Bella's was slightly too big. "We'll look back on this someday and remember how happy we were," Mom had said while adjusting Grandma Lita's collar. Now, looking back, I could see the happiness was real but unevenly distributed. Even in the photo, there were invisible hierarchies I'd been too close to recognize. Thursday morning at the cafe was unusually busy, a welcome distraction from the mental loops I'd been running since Tuesday's revelation. The espresso machine demanded total focus, leaving no room for brooding about family dynamics or Jeep Wranglers. Steam, grind, pour, repeat. The meditation of manual labor. Sandra had hired a new employee, Emilio, a recent film school graduate who moved through the cafe like he was choreographing a dance. He was quiet but observant, the kind of person who noticed when we were running low on oat milk before anyone else did. His presence changed the energy of our small team in subtle ways. "You're really good at this," he said during a brief lull, watching me create a leaf pattern in a customer's cappuccino. "2 years of practice," I replied, sliding the cup across the counter. "You pick up tricks." I meant the whole thing. The way you run this place, how you make everyone feel taken care of. It's like you see 3 steps ahead. The compliment caught me off guard. Most people noticed my efficiency without recognizing the emotional labor underneath it. Emilio seemed to understand that managing a cafe was about more than making coffee. It was about creating a small pocket of warmth in people's days. "What's your film background?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Are you working on projects?" "Documentary stuff, mostly. I'm interested in stories about family, immigration, the spaces between cultures." He cleaned the counter while talking, his hands never still. "My grandmother came here from Guadalajara in the 50s, and I keep thinking about all the stories she never told us. Like, what gets lost when people focus on survival instead of memory?" The question resonated in ways I wasn't prepared for. Our family had its own collection of untold stories, gaps in the narrative that I'd never thought to examine. "Grandma." Lita occasionally mentioned her childhood in Michoacán, but always in fragments. A detail about harvest festivals, a memory of her mother's singing voice, nothing comprehensive enough to build a complete picture. "My grandmother lives with us," I found myself saying. "Sometimes I wonder what she's not telling us too." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Maybe the not telling is protective," Emilio suggested. "Like, some stories are too heavy to pass down." The observation stayed with me through the rest of my shift and into the afternoon tutoring session. My student that day was Maria, a 16-year-old struggling with chemistry while juggling a part-time job at her family's restaurant. She reminded me of myself at that age, determined but overwhelmed, trying to balance academic ambitions with family obligations. "I don't understand why I have to learn about molecules when I already know I'm going to work in my parents' business," Maria said, staring at her textbook with frustration. "Maybe because understanding how things work gives you choices," I replied, sitting beside her at the library table. "Chemistry is just another way of seeing the world. The more ways you can see, the more options you have." As we worked through practice problems, I found myself thinking about choices and options in my own life. Had I chosen my work-focused lifestyle, or had circumstances chosen it for me? Had my parents consciously decided to treat Bella differently, or were they responding to patterns so old they'd become invisible? The evening dog-walking route took me through neighborhoods where every house seemed to contain a different version of the American dream. Some driveways held modest sedans with dented bumpers. Others showcased luxury SUVs that probably cost more than most people made in a year. The economic disparities were stark, but familiar, San Diego had always been a city of contrasts. Benny, the ancient basset hound, moved even more slowly than usual that evening. Mrs. Chen noticed his fatigue immediately when we returned to her house. "He's getting old, pobrecito," she said, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. "But he still loves his walks with you. Come, let's have tea." Her kitchen felt like a sanctuary after the day's emotional turbulence. The jasmine tea was perfectly steeped, and she'd arranged cookies on a plate painted with tiny blue flowers. These small rituals of hospitality had become precious to me over the months, moments of being cared for without having to earn it. "You look troubled today, mija," Mrs. Chen observed, settling into her chair across from me. "Want to talk about it?" I hadn't planned to confide in her, but something about her patient attention opened the floodgates. I told her about Bella's Jeep, about the years of working multiple jobs, about the growing realization that my parents might love us equally, but didn't show it equally. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, turning her teacup in its saucer. "When I came to this country," she finally said, "I had 2 daughters. One was like you, independent, determined, always working toward something. The other was, like your sister, sweet, social, needed more guidance. I treated them differently because they were different, but I didn't realize until much later that different treatment doesn't feel like love to the child who works harder for less recognition." Her honesty was both validating and heartbreaking. "How did you fix it?" I talked to them, not as their mother, but as a person who had made mistakes. I told my independent daughter that I had taken her strength for granted, that I had assumed she didn't need the same reassurance as her sister. I was wrong. The conversation lingered with me as I walked home in the soft evening light. San Diego in early summer was magic hour incarnate. Everything golden and possible, the air warm enough to promise longer days ahead. But even the beautiful light couldn't fully lift the weight I'd been carrying since Tuesday. Our house looked smaller every time I approached it, as if my growing awareness of family dynamics was physically shrinking the space. The white Jeep still dominated the driveway, making Carmen look like a poor relation. But tonight, instead of resentment, I felt something closer to clarity. Inside, the family was arranged in their usual evening positions. Dad on the couch with a beer and the news, Mom at the kitchen table grading papers, Grandma Lita in her recliner with a telenovela. Bella was curled up in the corner of the couch, laptop open, probably working on summer assignments. "How was your day, mija?" Mom asked without looking up from her papers. "Good," I said automatically, then paused. "Actually, can we talk? All of us?" Something in my tone made everyone look up. Dad muted the television, Mom set down her pen, and Bella closed her laptop. Even Grandma Lita turned in her chair to face me. I need to say something, and I'm not sure how to say it without sounding ungrateful or jealous. I took a breath, looking at each of their faces. I'm really happy for Bella about the Jeep. It's an amazing gift, and she deserves to be celebrated. But I'm also struggling with some feelings about it, and I think we need to talk about them. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was charged with attention. I could see Mom and Dad exchanging glances, probably trying to figure out where this was heading. I've been working 3 jobs for 2 years to save for my car, I continued. And before that, I worked all through high school to help with household expenses. I've never asked for help with college or rent or anything really. I've tried to be self-sufficient because I thought that's what you needed from me. Ava, we're proud of how independent you are, Dad said gently. I know you are, but independence became my role in this family, and I think I got stuck in it. You stopped seeing me as someone who might want or need the kind of support you give. Bella shifted on the couch, looking uncomfortable. I didn't ask for the car, Ava. I had no idea they were planning it. I know you didn't, and this isn't about you. I said quickly. This is about me finally realizing that I've been invisible in certain ways, and part of that is my own fault for not speaking up sooner. Mom's eyes had filled with tears. We never meant to make you feel invisible, mija. I don't think you meant to, I agreed, but impact and intention aren't always the same thing. The conversation that followed was messy and emotional and necessary. We talked about expectations and assumptions, about how family roles can become prisons, about the difference between being proud of someone's strength and taking that strength for granted. Dad admitted that they'd stopped including me in certain decisions because I seemed to have everything figured out. Mom acknowledged that they'd treated Bella's milestones differently than mine, partly because Bella's struggles were more visible and immediate. You make everything look easy, Mom said through tears. Even when I know it's not easy, you handle it so well that I forget you might need support too. Grandma Lita, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. In my family, we had a saying, the strong horse carries the heaviest load, but we forgot that even strong horses need rest and care. As the evening wound down, nothing was completely resolved. These kinds of realizations don't get fixed in one conversation. But something had shifted. The invisible dynamics had been named, the assumptions had been challenged, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was fully present in my own family. Later, lying in bed, I looked at the family photo on my nightstand, a smaller version of the one hanging in the living room. The same faces, the same arrangements, but now I could see it differently. Not as evidence of my marginalization, but as a snapshot of people learning how to love each other imperfectly. Tomorrow would bring another 4:47 a.m. alarm, another day of coffee beans and dog walks and chemistry lessons. But tonight, I fell asleep feeling less alone in the world, more seen in my own home. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones you never plan to have. Grandma Lita's recipe box sat on the highest shelf in our kitchen pantry, a weathered wooden container that required a step stool to reach. I'd seen Mom retrieve it countless times over the years, usually during holidays or special occasions when traditional Mexican dishes were required. But I'd never opened it myself until Friday morning, when something Mrs. Chen had said about untold stories made me curious about what secrets our family kept in index cards and careful handwriting. The box was heavier than expected, dense with decades of accumulated culinary wisdom. Inside, hundreds of recipe cards were organized with the precision of a library catalog system. Grandma Lita's handwriting flowed across the cards in careful Spanish script, occasionally interrupted by Mom's English translations in the margins. But mixed among the recipes for mole poblano and tres leches cake were other things. Pressed flowers, old photographs, folded pieces of paper that looked like letters. The box was more than a cooking reference. It was a repository of memory, a physical manifestation of everything Grandma Lita had carried with her across borders and decades. One photograph stopped me completely. A young woman who looked remarkably like me stood beside a man in mechanic's overalls, both of them smiling beside a classic car. Not a Mustang, but something similar, something with curves and chrome and obvious pride. The woman wore a simple dress and held keys in her raised hand, the universal gesture of new ownership. I flipped the photo over. In Grandma Lita's handwriting, Rosa y Miguel, Primer Carro, 1985. Mom and Dad, younger than I was now, celebrating their first car together. The discovery felt like finding a missing puzzle piece. Mom had never mentioned saving for a car, had never told stories about working multiple jobs or making sacrifices for transportation. In every family narrative I'd heard, the focus was always on survival basics: rent, food, electricity, never on dreams or wants. ¿Qué haces, mija? Grandma. Lita's voice from the kitchen doorway made me jump. I'm sorry, I was looking for... I realized I didn't have a good explanation for why I'd been going through her personal things. I was curious about the recipes. She moved slowly into the kitchen, studying my face with the sharp attention that made people think she was younger than her 82 years. But you found something else, Verdad? I held up the photograph. Mom and Dad's first car? Grandma Lita's expression softened. She took the photo gently, as if it were made of butterfly wings. I see. Your mother worked so hard for that little car. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. The revelation hit like cold water. Mom worked multiple jobs? Por supuesto. Your father was in construction, but work wasn't steady then. Rosa worked at a restaurant during the day, cleaned offices at night, sometimes did alterations for neighbors on weekends. Grandma Lita settled into her kitchen chair, the photo still in her hands. She wanted that car so badly. Independence, you know. The ability to get to work without depending on anyone else. I sat across from her, my mind reeling. How long did it take her to save for it? Almost 2 years. I remember because she marked every paycheck on a calendar, calculated every dollar. Very organized, very determined. Like someone else I know. The parallel was impossible to ignore. Mom had been exactly my age when she'd saved for her first car, had followed almost the identical path of multiple jobs and meticulous budgeting. But she'd never shared this story with me, had never offered it as encouragement during my own saving journey. Why doesn't she talk about it? I asked. Grandma Lita was quiet for a moment, studying the photograph. Sometimes when we become parents, we forget we were ever young. We see our children struggling and want to spare them, not understanding that struggle was what made us strong. She reached into the recipe box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your mother wrote this the day she bought that car. I found it years later, cleaning out her old room. The paper was yellowed with age, covered in Mom's younger handwriting. It was a list, similar to the budget spreadsheets I kept, but more emotional. Goals mixed with dreams, mixed with practical concerns. After I buy the car, take a weekend trip somewhere beautiful. Drive to work without worrying about bus schedules. Feel proud of what I accomplished. Remember that I can do hard things. Save for our wedding. Maybe start thinking about a house someday. Never take this feeling for granted. Reading Mom's 24-year-old hopes felt like looking into a mirror across time. She'd wanted the same things I wanted. Independence, pride, the satisfaction of earned achievement. She'd felt the same way I felt when I finally brought Carmen home. She kept this? I asked, overwhelmed by the intimacy of reading her private thoughts. I kept it, Grandma Lita corrected. Mothers need to remember their daughters' triumphs, even when the daughters forget them. The kitchen filled with the morning sounds of our household waking up. Dad's shower running upstairs, the coffee maker gurgling to life, Bella's alarm buzzing through the walls. Normal Friday morning chaos that usually felt comforting, but today felt surreal. Can I ask you something, Abuela? I'd never called her by the formal title before, but somehow it felt appropriate for this conversation. Do you think Mom treats Bella and me differently because we're different people, or because she forgot what it felt like to be young and working for something? Both, she said without hesitation. Your mother loves you both completely, but she sees Bella as needing protection and you as needing space. Sometimes love looks like giving gifts. Sometimes love looks like stepping back. But what if the person who needs space actually needs to be seen too? Grandma Lita smiled, the kind of smile that contained decades of wisdom about family dynamics. Then that person needs to speak up, because parents aren't mind readers, even the best ones. The conversation stayed with me through my Friday routine. At the cafe, I found myself studying customers' faces, wondering what untold stories they carried, what family photos lived in their recipe boxes. Emilio noticed my distraction during the lunch rush. You're somewhere else today, he observed, while restocking cups. Just thinking about family stuff, I admitted. How well do you think we really know the people we're related to? Probably not as well as we think, he said. My mom just told me last week that she wanted to be a teacher before she had kids, 26 years old, and I'm just learning about her dreams. The afternoon tutoring session was with David, the student whose mother had praised my teaching style. He was struggling with a chemistry concept that suddenly felt like a metaphor for family dynamics. So in this reaction, I explained, the same elements can create completely different compounds depending on the conditions. Temperature, pressure, timing, they all matter. Like how the same ingredients can make different cookies? David asked. Exactly. Same basic components, different results based on the environment. As I said it, I realized the same principle applied to families. The same parents, the same love, the same basic values, but different circumstances, different timing, different pressures creating different outcomes for different children. That evening, instead of my usual dog-walking route, I drove Carmen to the beach. She handled the coastal highway like she was born for it, engine humming with contentment as we wound through Torrey Pines. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead, painted gold and pink by the setting sun. I parked at a scenic overlook and called, "Mom." She answered on the second ring, sounding surprised to hear from me during evening hours. "Hi, Mija. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I just wanted to ask you something." I watched surfers catching last light waves below the cliff. Grandma Lita showed me a photo today. You and Dad with your first car in 1985. Mom was quiet for so long I wondered if the call had dropped. She kept that picture? She kept a lot of things, including a list you wrote the day you bought the car. Another pause. Oh my God, I'd forgotten about that list. You worked multiple jobs to save for it, just like I did for Carmen. I did. Her voice was soft with memory. I was so proud of that little car. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. Why didn't you ever tell me that story? When I was saving for Carmen, why didn't you share it? The question hung between us, carried by ocean breeze and the distant sound of waves. When Mom finally answered, her voice was thick with emotion. Because I wanted your life to be easier than mine was. I wanted you to not have to work so hard for basic things like transportation. I thought if I told you about my struggles, it would seem like I was saying struggle was necessary, or good. But my struggle led to something beautiful, I said, looking at Carmen's reflection in the side mirror. Just like yours did. I know that now. I'm starting to understand that I robbed you of connection by trying to protect you from difficulty. We talked until the sun disappeared completely, about dreams and cars and the different ways love manifests across generations. About how parents' attempts to shield their children from hardship can sometimes shield them from understanding and validation too. When I drove home, the house looked different in the darkness. Still small, still crowded with too many people and too many dreams, but also warm with the possibility of deeper understanding. Bella's Jeep and my Mustang sat side by side in the driveway, no longer symbols of inequality, but representations of different paths toward the same destination. Inside, I found Mom in the kitchen, the recipe box open on the table. She was looking through old photos and cards, her face soft with remembering. "There are so many stories in here," she said without looking up. "Stories I thought I was protecting you from, but maybe you needed to hear them." I sat beside her, and together we went through Grandma Lita's carefully preserved memories. Each recipe card, each photograph, each pressed flower was a piece of our family's larger story. Immigration and adaptation, struggle and triumph, dreams deferred and dreams achieved. "Can I ask you about this one?" I held up a recipe card for something called Sopa de la Esperanza, soup of hope. Mom smiled. Grandma Lita made that when we were especially poor, mostly water and vegetables, but she called it hope soup because it meant we still believed better days were coming. Did they come? "Look around," Mom said, gesturing at our small but comfortable house, at the evidence of a life built through persistence and love. We're sitting in them. That night, I replaced the motivational poster above my bed with the photograph of Mom and Dad beside their first car. Same determined smile, same raised keys, same pride in hard-won achievement. The poster had been about future dreams, but the photograph was about inherited strength, the knowledge that the capacity for persistence runs in families, passed down through recipe boxes and remembered stories. Sometimes the most important, family heirlooms aren't objects, but understanding. Sometimes learning who your parents were before they became your parents helps you understand who you're becoming as their child. The glove compartment of a 1968 Mustang wasn't designed for much. Maybe some registration papers, a few napkins, emergency cash. But when I opened Carmen's glove compartment Saturday morning to look for my sunglasses, I found something that shouldn't have been there. A small manila envelope tucked behind the owner's manual, yellow with age and sealed with tape that had lost its adhesive power decades ago. Inside the envelope were 3 items that changed everything I thought I knew about my family's story. A handwritten letter dated 23 years ago, a bank deposit slip, and a photograph of a young man in military uniform standing beside the very car I now owned. The letter was addressed to Miguel Jr. in careful feminine handwriting, but the signature at the bottom made my hands shake. Con amor siempre, Rosa Moreno. My mother had written a letter to Mr. Rodriguez's son, the young man who'd planned to restore this car before he enlisted and never came home. But it wasn't just any letter. It was a love letter, full of hopes and dreams and promises about their future together. Mi querido Miguel, it began, I finished saving for the car today. 2 years of working every shift I could find, and finally we can start our life together properly. I can't wait to drive to our wedding in this beautiful car, to take road trips along the coast, to teach our children how to drive in something with history and character. The words blurred as I read, my mother's young voice echoing across decades of silence. She had loved Miguel Rodriguez Jr. They had planned a life together, the car I'd worked so hard to buy, the car that had become a symbol of my own independence and determination, had originally been intended as their shared future. The deposit slip was from August 1997 for $3,200, exactly the amount Mom had saved for her half of the car purchase. Miguel's matching amount would have completed the transaction, would have made them co-owners of a dream they'd planned to restore together. But Miguel had enlisted instead of buying the car, and according to the dates, he'd shipped out 3 months before I was born. The photograph showed Miguel Jr. in his dress uniform, one hand resting on Carmen's hood, his smile confident and young and full of tomorrow. On the back, someone had written, Para Rosa, remember me like this. I sat in Carmen's driver's seat for a long time, holding pieces of a story that recontextualized everything I thought I understood about my parents' relationship, about our family's history, about the coincidences that had led me to this particular car. Mr. Rodriguez had sold me the car his son had planned to share with my mother. My mother had never mentioned knowing Miguel Jr., had never acknowledged any connection beyond neighborhood friendship with his family. Dad had married a woman who'd been in love with someone else, who'd saved money for a future that never materialized. The implications were staggering. Had my parents met on the rebound from Mom's relationship with Miguel? Had Dad known about her previous engagement? Was my birth timing coincidental, or was I Miguel's child who'd grown up calling another man father? My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Coffee later? Need to vent about nursing school applications. I stared at the message, trying to imagine having a normal conversation about normal problems when my entire understanding of my family had just shifted. How do you text back? Sure, but first I need to figure out if my dad might not be my biological father without sounding completely unhinged. Instead, I drove to the beach, needing space and air and the perspective that comes from looking at something larger than your own confusion. Carmen handled the coastal road like she remembered it, like she'd driven these routes before with different passengers, different dreams. I parked at the same overlook where I'd called Mom the night before, but this time I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone. What question do you ask first in a conversation like this? How do you approach someone you've known your entire life and admit you might not know them at all? The letter felt heavy in my hands. weighted with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to understand. Mom's handwriting looked exactly the same as it did now, her characteristic mix of cursive and print, the way she dotted her I's with small circles instead of dots. But the content was so different from any version of my mother I'd ever known. This Rosa was romantic, impulsive, willing to invest everything in a shared dream with someone who might leave. The Rosa who raised me was practical, cautious, focused on stability and security above all else. What had changed her? Losing Miguel? Having a child? Marrying Dad? I thought about the conversation we'd had the night before, about struggle and protection and the stories parents choose to share or hide. But this felt bigger than protective silence. This felt like a complete alternative identity. A life unlived that had shaped every decision that followed. The sun was starting to set when I finally drove home, no closer to knowing how to handle what I'd discovered. Our house looked the same from the outside, but I approached it like I was visiting a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Inside, Saturday evening was unfolding in its typical pattern. Dad was in his workshop, behind the house, probably tinkering with some project or another. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Bella was on the couch with her laptop, and Grandma Lita was watching her telenovelas with the volume slightly too loud. Normal family chaos that now felt surreal. "How was your day, mija?" Mom asked. When I walked through the kitchen, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Interesting," I said, which was possibly the understatement of the decade. I went to my room and spread the letter, photograph, and deposit slip across my bed, like pieces of evidence in a detective story. The timeline was clear enough. Mom had saved money for a car with Miguel Jr. He'd enlisted before they could buy it together. And 3 months later, I was born. 9 months before that would have been... I stopped the calculation there. Some math problems are too complicated for your own emotional well-being. Instead, I studied the photograph of Miguel Jr. He had dark eyes and a confident smile, the kind of face that would have been handsome in any era. I searched for resemblances to my own features, but genetics are unreliable storytellers. People see what they're looking for, and I was looking for answers that might not exist in bone structure and eye shape. A knock on my door interrupted my investigation. "Ava, dinner's ready." Sitting at the family dinner table that night felt like performing in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Dad talked about a job interview he had Monday, a construction project that might lead to steadier work. Mom asked Bella about her summer classes, made suggestions about time management and study habits. Grandma Lita told a story about her telenovela that made everyone laugh. I participated when prompted, asked follow-up questions, helped clear the table afterward. But underneath the normalcy, I was studying faces and mannerisms, looking for clues about which version of my family was real. After dinner, I found Dad in his workshop, hunched over a wooden jewelry box he was making for Mom's upcoming birthday. His hands moved with the precision of someone who'd spent decades working with tools, creating beautiful things from rough materials. "Need any help?" I asked, settling onto a stool beside his workbench. "Just keeping me company is help enough," he said, glancing up with a smile that was purely affectionate. "What's on your mind, mija? You've been quiet tonight." The question was an opening I hadn't expected. Dad had always been the more emotionally available parent, the one who asked direct questions and listened to actual answers. But asking direct questions about paternity wasn't exactly covered in any parenting manual. "Can I ask you something about you and Mom's early relationship?" I started carefully. "Of course." He set down his sandpaper and gave me his full attention. "How did you two meet?" I realize I don't know that story. Dad's expression softened with the kind of smile that comes from remembering young love. "We met at a church dance. She was there with her friends. I was there because my mother dragged me." He laughed. "Your mom was the most beautiful woman in the room, but she looked so sad. like she was somewhere else entirely. Sad how? Like she'd lost something important and was trying to figure out how to live without it. Dad picked up a piece of wood, turning it over in his hands. I asked her to dance, and she said yes, but I could tell part of her wasn't there. It took months before she was really present with me. The honesty was both surprising and devastating. Dad had known Mom was grieving something when they met, had chosen to love her through whatever loss she was carrying. Did she ever tell you what she was sad about? Dad was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. She'd been in love with someone who went away. Military service. I never pressed for details because it seemed like something she needed to leave in the past. Did it bother you? Being with someone who was getting over someone else? At first, yes. But then I realized that her capacity to love deeply was exactly what made her worth waiting for. I knew that if she could love me the way she'd loved him, I'd be the luckiest man alive. The conversation was both reassuring and confusing. Dad clearly knew about Miguel Jr., but not necessarily about the car or the shared savings or the specific timeline of their relationship. He'd married Mom knowing she was in love with someone else, but perhaps not knowing how recently that relationship had ended. Do you ever wonder about the roads not taken? I asked. Every day, Dad said simply. But wondering isn't the same as regretting. The life I got with your mother, with you and Bella, has been better than anything I could have imagined. When I was young and trying to win her heart, walking back to the house, I felt both more confused and more settled than before. Whatever secrets our family carried, they were held with love rather than deception. Dad's openness about Mom's previous relationship suggested that honesty, rather than hidden truth, was the family value I'd been raised with. But the letter in my room still demanded a response. The question wasn't whether to confront Mom about her past. The question was how to do it with the same love and patience Dad had shown when he fell for a woman still grieving someone else. That night, I lay awake staring at the photograph of Mom and Dad beside their first car, the one Grandma Lita had kept in her recipe box. In the morning light, they both looked young and hopeful and ready for whatever came next. But now, I could see something else in Mom's expression. Gratitude. The look of someone who'd been given a second chance at happiness and was determined not to waste it. Some stories are more complicated than they appear in family photographs. Some love stories have chapters that get written over other love stories, creating palimpsests of emotion that shape everything that follows. The question was whether understanding those complications would strengthen our family bonds or complicate them beyond repair. Only one way to find out. Jordan's college acceptance letter had been pinned to her bedroom wall for 3 years, a constant reminder of dreams deferred for practical necessities. The letter was from UC San Diego's nursing program, dated back when we were both 21, and thought we had all the time in the world to pursue our ambitions. But life had other plans. Her mother's cancer diagnosis, my family's financial struggles, the way reality has of interrupting even the most careful planning. Now at 24, Jordan was finally ready to reapply. Her mother was in remission. Her savings account was sufficient for tuition, and the nursing shortage meant acceptance chances were better than they'd been 3 years ago. But staring at that old acceptance letter while filling out new applications was like confronting the gap between who you thought you'd be by now and who you actually are. I keep thinking about all the time I lost, Jordan said, highlighting sections of the application with the methodical focus she brought to everything important. 3 years I could have been in school. 3 years closer to the career I actually want. We were sitting in her apartment Sunday afternoon, acceptance letters and application materials spread across her kitchen table like evidence of dreams interrupted and resumed. I'd come over ostensibly to help her with essay questions, but really, because I needed to talk to someone about the letter I'd found in Carmen's glove compartment. Jordan was the only person who knew me well enough to understand why family secrets felt so destabilizing. But think about what you learned in those 3 years, I pointed out, reading over her personal statement draft. Taking care of your mom, working in the medical field, understanding healthcare from the patient side. That's going to make you a better nurse than you would have been straight out of school. Intellectually, I know that, she said, chewing on her pen cap. But emotionally, it feels like I'm starting over while everyone else is finishing. Like I missed the train, and now I'm trying to catch up. The conversation hit uncomfortably close to my own fears about time and progress. I'd been working since I was 16, but what did I have to show for it beyond a vintage car and exhaustion? Most of my high school classmates were finishing college, starting careers, living the linear progression that I'd somehow missed or actively avoided. Can I tell you something that might change the subject entirely? I asked, pulling the letter from my purse. Jordan's attention shifted immediately when she saw the envelope's age and yellowing tape. I'd been carrying the letter with me all weekend, unable to leave it at home, but unsure what to do with it. What is this? I found it in Carmen's glove compartment yesterday. It's from my mom to Miguel Rodriguez Jr., Mr. Rodriguez's son, who died in military service. Apparently, they were planning to buy the car together, and she was in love with him. Jordan's eyes widened as she read the letter, her application forgotten. Holy shit, Ava. This is huge. The timeline suggests Miguel might be my father, or at least that Mom was involved with him very close to when I was conceived. Have you talked to your mom about it? Not yet. I don't even know how to start that conversation. Hey, Mom. Found a love letter in my car. Am I your biological father's daughter or what? Jordan set the letter down carefully, like it might combust, if handled roughly. This explains so much about why you connected with that car, though. Like, maybe it wasn't coincidence that you were drawn to it. Maybe it was family calling to family. Or maybe it's just a weird coincidence and I'm reading too much into everything. When has anything in your life been coincidental? Jordan asked. You work 3 jobs and somehow end up buying the exact car your mother planned to share with. Her first love? That's not coincidence. That's fate trying to tell you something. We spent the afternoon processing implications and possibilities. Jordan's analytical mind helped me organize the emotional chaos into manageable questions. What did I need to know? What was I afraid to learn? How could I approach Mom in a way that honored both my need for truth and her right to privacy about her past? The weird thing is that I'm not even sure I want to know definitively about paternity, I admitted. Dad is my father in every way that matters. But I want to understand why Mom never told this story, why our family has this whole hidden chapter. Maybe because some stories are too painful to tell until someone finds the right reason to ask, Jordan suggested. As evening approached, I helped Jordan finish her application essays, but my mind kept drifting to family secrets and interrupted. Dreams. Her nursing school story felt connected to my mother's Miguel story. Both about lives redirected by circumstances, both about dreams that get deferred but not abandoned. You know what's funny? Jordan said, as we sealed her application in its envelope. 3 years ago, I thought delayed dreams were failed dreams. But now I think maybe some things need to wait until you're ready to fully appreciate them. Driving. Home in Carmen, I thought about readiness and timing. About the difference between delayed dreams and dreams that find you when you need them most. Maybe I'd been drawn to this particular car not just because of its beauty, but because it carried stories I needed to discover. Maybe Jordan was returning to nursing school now because she'd developed the emotional maturity to handle its demands. Maybe Mom had kept her Miguel story private because she'd been protecting something precious until someone was ready to understand it. Our house looked peaceful in the early evening light. Sunday dinner smells drifting from the kitchen windows. But approaching the front door felt like approaching a conversation I wasn't sure I was prepared to have. How do you ask someone to rewrite the story of your family? How do you honor their right to privacy while asserting your need to understand where you came from? Inside, Mom was alone in the kitchen, humming while she stirred something on the stove. Dad was still in his workshop. Bella was out with friends, and Grandma Lita was napping in her chair. The timing felt intentional, like the universe was offering a private moment for a conversation that needed to happen without an audience. "Smells good," I said, settling at the kitchen table. "Pozole," Mom replied, not turning around. "Your grandmother's recipe. She says it's good for the soul when the weather changes." I watched her move around the kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who'd been cooking for her family for decades. Her hair was pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn since I was little, and she hummed the same songs she'd hummed when I was young enough to stand on a chair beside her, helping with simple tasks. "Mom, can we talk about something?" Something in my tone made her turn around, wooden spoon still in her hand. "Of course, mija. What's on your mind?" I pulled the letter from my purse and set it on the table between us. "I found this in Carmen's glove compartment yesterday." The effect was immediate and devastating. Mom's face went pale, and she sat down, heavily in the chair across from me, staring at the envelope like it contained a ghost. "Where did you—" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It was in the car, hidden behind the owner's manual. I think Miguel Jr. must have kept it all these years." Mom reached for the letter with shaking hands, and I watched 24 years of carefully maintained composure crumble in real time. When she opened the envelope and saw her own handwriting, tears started flowing immediately. "I thought this was lost forever," she said, touching the paper like it was sacred. "I gave it to Miguel the day before he shipped out, with instructions to read it when he got to his base. I never knew if he actually received it." "Mom, who was Miguel Jr. to you?" The question hung in the air while she composed herself, wiping tears with the back of her hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but quiet. "He was the love of my life. We met in high school, dated through community college, planned to get married when he finished his military service. This car was going to be our wedding gift, to ourselves. What happened? He died in a training accident 6 months after he enlisted. Never even made it to deployment." Mom's voice broke on the last word. I was pregnant and alone and completely devastated. The confirmation hit like a physical blow, even though I'd been preparing for it all weekend. "I'm Miguel's daughter." "Yes and no," Mom said, looking at me directly for the first time since she'd seen the letter. "Biologically, yes. But your father, the man who raised you, who loves you, who taught you to drive and helped with homework, and will walk you down the aisle someday, he's your real father in every way that matters." "Does Dad know?" "He's always known. I told him before we got married, told him about Miguel and about you. He said he wanted to love us both. That family is what you choose to build together." The conversation that followed was 24 years overdue. Mom told me about grieving Miguel while trying to figure out how to be a single mother, about meeting Dad at a church dance when I was 6 months old, about the slow process of learning to love again while honoring what she'd lost. "I never told you about Miguel because I didn't want you to feel like you were missing something," she explained. "Your father chose to be your dad every single day. That choice seemed more important than biology. But don't I have a right to know where I came from?" "You do," Mom agreed, "and I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking there would be a right time, but the right time never came." As the evening progressed, other family members gradually joined the conversation. Dad came in from his workshop and quietly listened to me read Miguel's letter aloud. Bella arrived home and was filled in on revelations that recontextualized everything she thought she knew about our family. Even Grandma Lita woke from her nap and contributed memories about Miguel Jr. that she'd been keeping private for decades. "He was a good boy," she said, settling into her kitchen chair. "Very respectful, very much in love with your mother. He would have been a good father to you." "But he wasn't my father," I said, looking at Dad. "Not in any way that mattered." Dad's smile was everything I needed to see. "You're my daughter, Ava. From the moment I held you when you were 6 months, old until now, biology doesn't change that." That night, I lay in bed thinking about family stories and the different ways truth can be told. Miguel Jr. had given me life, but Dad had given me everything else. Confidence, values, work ethic, the belief that effort and love could overcome any obstacle. The letter was now framed on my dresser, not as evidence of secrets kept, but as proof that some love stories have multiple chapters, that families can be built on choice as much as genetics, that the most important truths aren't always the most obvious ones. Jordan had been right about dreams and timing. Some things need to wait until you're ready to understand them fully. At 24, I was finally old enough to hear my family's complete story without feeling like it threatened the foundation of everything I'd believed. The truth hadn't changed who I was. It had just given me a fuller picture of where I'd come from and how much love had gone into creating the life I'd always taken for granted. Rosa's immigration documents lived in a fireproof safe in our parents' bedroom closet, alongside birth certificates, social security cards, and other papers that prove a life's legitimacy to government officials. I'd never seen the documents before Monday evening, when Mom pulled them out to help me understand the full scope of choices that had shaped our family's story. The papers told a tale of determination that made my own struggles look simple by comparison. Migration routes traced across multiple documents, work visas that had expired and been renewed, English proficiency certificates earned through night classes, citizenship paperwork that had taken 8 years to complete. Each stamp and signature represented bureaucratic mountains climbed while working multiple jobs and raising children and building a life from nothing but hope and persistence. I was 16 when we crossed, Mom said, spreading the documents across the dining room table like pieces of a complex puzzle. My parents brought me and my 2 brothers, leaving everything we'd ever known because there was no future in our village. The conversation had started after dinner, when I'd asked about the practical realities of immigration. How does a family survive in a new country without money, connections, or fluency in the language? Mom's answers revealed layers of sacrifice I'd never considered, choices that had rippled forward through generations. The first years were the hardest, she continued, pointing to employment documents from factories and cleaning services. I went to high school during the day, worked at a textile factory at night, helped translate for my parents during any business hours. There was no time for dating or friends or normal teenager things. When did you meet Miguel Jr.? Community college. First time in my life I was in school with people my own age who spoke both languages, who understood what it meant to be caught between 2 cultures. Mom's face softened with memory. Miguel was born here, but his parents were from Guadalajara, same region as my family. He understood the pressure to succeed not just for yourself, but for everyone who had sacrificed to get you there. The documents painted a picture of a young woman working toward stability through education and employment, someone who saw Miguel Jr., not just as a romantic partner, but as a teammate in building the kind of life their parents had dreamed of, providing. The car they'd planned to buy together wasn't just transportation. It was a symbol of American success, proof that the immigration gamble had paid off. When Miguel died, I felt like I'd lost my future, Mom admitted. Not just him, but the whole vision of what our life was going to look like. I was pregnant, alone, and completely overwhelmed by grief and responsibility. Bella had been listening quietly from the living room, but she joined us at the table as the conversation deepened. At 19, she was the same age Mom had been, when she'd lost Miguel and faced single motherhood in a country that still felt foreign, despite years of residence. How did you survive it? Bella asked, studying the immigration timeline with new understanding. 1 day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. Your grandmother moved in to help with childcare so I could keep working. I took English classes at night to improve my job prospects. I grieved Miguel while trying to figure out how to be someone's mother when I still felt like a scared girl myself. Dad had joined the conversation gradually, adding details and context from his perspective. He'd met Mom when she was working as a restaurant server, struggling to support a baby while taking business classes at community college. Their courtship had been complicated by her grief, his patience, and the practical realities of blending families across cultural differences. "Your mother was the strongest person I'd ever met," Dad said, looking at her with the same admiration I'd seen in their wedding photos. She was building a life from scratch while carrying this enormous loss, and she was doing it with grace and determination. "But it wasn't just strength," Mom corrected. "It was survival. When you have a child depending on you, you don't get the luxury of falling apart completely." The conversation continued past midnight. 24 years of family history being examined and recontextualized through adult eyes. I learned about the financial calculations that had determined where we lived, how many jobs Mom worked, which dreams got prioritized and which got deferred. Every decision had been made with children's futures in mind, with the immigrants understanding that sacrifice today creates opportunities tomorrow. "That's why the car thing hit you so hard," Mom said as we were putting the documents away. "Not because you begrudged Bella her gift, but because you inherited my work ethic without inheriting the context that created it." "What do you mean?" "You grew up watching me work multiple jobs, prioritize family over personal desires, sacrifice immediate pleasure for long-term stability. But you didn't grow up knowing why those values were necessary for survival. So you internalized the behavior without understanding it was situational, not moral." The insight was devastating in its accuracy. I had indeed absorbed Mom's approach to work and money, without understanding that her choices had been shaped by circumstances I'd never faced. Immigration, single motherhood, cultural displacement. None of those pressures existed in my life, but I'd adopted the coping mechanisms as if they did. Bella grew up seeing the results of that sacrifice, Mom continued. Stability, opportunity, the freedom to make choices based on preference rather than survival. So she internalized different lessons about what's possible and what's necessary. "Are you saying I didn't need to work 3 jobs to buy Carmen?" "I'm saying you chose to work 3 jobs because that's how you learned to approach goals. But you had other options that I didn't have at your age." The realization was both liberating and frustrating. Had I made my life unnecessarily difficult by copying survival strategies I didn't actually need? Had my pride and self-sufficiency been masking an inability to accept help that was freely offered? Tuesday morning at the cafe felt surreal after Monday night's revelations. Every interaction with customers seemed to highlight class differences I'd never noticed before. Who ordered expensive drinks without checking prices? Who counted exact change? Who apologized for paying with small bills? The gap between financial security and financial stress was narrower than I'd realized, but the psychological effects were profound. Emilio noticed my distraction during the mid-morning lull. "You look like someone who learned something important but isn't sure what to do with the information," he observed. "That's startlingly accurate," I admitted. "How do you handle it when you realize your whole understanding of something was based on incomplete information?" "Depends on the something," he said, wiping down the espresso machine with methodical precision. "But usually I try to be grateful for the new information instead of angry about the old assumptions. Even when the new information means you've been making things harder for yourself than necessary? Especially then. Hard work that wasn't necessary is still hard work. The effort wasn't wasted just because it wasn't required." The afternoon tutoring session was with Maria, the 16-year-old who reminded me of myself at that age. But today I saw her differently. Not as a miniature version of my own experience, but as someone facing pressures I'd never had to navigate. "My parents want me to focus on school, but I feel guilty not working more hours at the restaurant," Maria said, struggling with chemistry problems while worrying about family finances. "They sacrifice so much to get us here, and I feel like I should be contributing more." "What do your parents say when you talk to them about this?" "They say education is the contribution they want from me right now. But it feels selfish to be studying when they're working so hard." I recognized the internal conflict immediately. The immigrant child's burden of feeling obligated to justify every opportunity through immediate productivity. But talking to Maria made me realize how my own relationship to work had been shaped by similar dynamics, even though my parents had never explicitly asked me to contribute financially. What if contribution looks different at different stages of life? I suggested. What if your job right now is to become the person who can help your family in bigger ways later? As I said it, I realized I was offering advice I needed to hear myself. Maybe my role in our family didn't have to be the one who works 3 jobs and never asks for help. Maybe there were other ways to contribute that I'd never considered, because I'd been so focused on proving my worth through exhaustion. That evening, I drove Carmen along the coastal highway, thinking about identity and inheritance, about the difference between choosing your struggles and having struggles choose you. The ocean stretched endlessly to the horizon, beautiful and indifferent to human complications. When I got home, I found Bella in her room, staring at her laptop screen with frustration. What's wrong? I'm trying to figure out financial aid for next semester and it's so confusing. Mom's helping, but she's busy, and I feel stupid for not understanding it myself. The old me would have offered to help while secretly judging her for not figuring it out independently. But the new me, informed by 24 hours of family, revelations, saw an opportunity for actual sisterhood. Want me to take a look? I've gotten pretty good at navigating financial bureaucracy. We spent the next hour working through FAFSA forms and scholarship applications, and for the first time in months, our age difference felt like an asset rather than a source of resentment. I could help her navigate systems I'd learned through necessity, while she could teach me about accepting support without feeling diminished by it. Can I ask you something? Bella said as we finished the last application. Do you think Mom and Dad treat us differently because they love us differently, or because they see us differently? I think they love us the same, but show it differently, because they think we need different things, I said, finally understanding something I'd been struggling with for weeks. They see you as someone who benefits from encouragement and support. They see me as someone who thrives on independence and challenge. But what if we both need both things sometimes? Then we probably need to tell them that instead of expecting them to figure it out on their own. That night, I called Mr. Rodriguez to tell him about finding the letter and learning Miguel Jr.'s story. He listened quietly while I explained the family connections none of us had realized existed. Miguel would be so proud to know his car went to Rosa's daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He always believed in full circles, in things finding their way to where they belong. Do you think he would have minded that I bought the car instead of inheriting it? Mijo, he would have respected the hell out of you earning it yourself. That boy understood the value of work. The conversation felt like a blessing I hadn't known I needed. Miguel Jr.'s car had found its way to Miguel Jr.'s daughter through merit rather than charity, through choice rather than obligation. The coincidence was profound enough to feel like intention. Like some stories are determined by forces larger than individual decision-making. Some families are built through shared genetics, others through shared choices, and the strongest ones combine both. Elements in ways that honor the past, while building toward the future. My family had been shaped by immigration and loss, and the determination to create something better from whatever materials were available. Understanding that history didn't change my relationship to work or achievement, but it changed my understanding of why those values mattered and how they could be expressed. Hard work wasn't the only way to show love or prove worth, but it was one way, and it was the way I'd chosen, because it felt authentic to who I was. Carmen was still my car, earned, through my own effort and determination, but now she was also a bridge between past and present, a symbol of dreams that transcend individual lifetimes, a reminder that some inheritances are earned rather than given, and those are often the most valuable ones of all. The new keys arrived on a Wednesday morning in September, 3 months after everything changed, and 6 months after I'd first brought Carmen home. They weren't car keys. They were house keys, apartment keys, the keys to a small one-bedroom place in Hillcrest that I could afford, because I'd finally learned the difference between working hard and working smart. The apartment was nothing fancy. 650 square feet with original hardwood floors and a kitchen window that looked out onto a courtyard where neighbors hung laundry and herbs grew in mismatched pots. But it was mine in a way that felt different from owning Carmen, different from any kind of ownership I'd experienced before. The car had been about proving I could achieve something through persistence. The apartment was about choosing what kind of life I wanted to live. Moving out hadn't been dramatic or conflict-filled. Instead, it had grown naturally from conversations that started with Miguel Jr.'s letter and evolved into family discussions about independence, support, and the different ways love can be expressed across generations. Mom and Dad weren't losing a daughter. They were gaining the knowledge that they'd raised someone capable of building her own life while maintaining strong family connections. "I'm not moving out because I'm unhappy," I'd explained during one of our kitchen table conversations. "I'm moving out because I'm ready to be the adult version of myself instead of the teenager version who never left home." The distinction mattered to everyone involved. This wasn't rebellion or rejection. It was graduation. Jordan helped me move. Her nursing school acceptance letter finally framed on her own bedroom wall, after years of living as a possibility rather than a reality. We'd both learned something about timing and readiness, about the difference between delayed dreams and dreams that ripen when you're prepared to fully appreciate them. "Remember when we thought we were behind everyone else?" Jordan asked, loading boxes into Carmen's back seat. The Mustang wasn't practical for moving furniture, but she handled small loads with dignity. "I'm starting to think everyone else is behind us," I replied, surveying my former bedroom one last time. We learned things about persistence and priority that you can't learn when everything comes easily. The first night in my own apartment was quiet in a way that felt sacred. No family conversations drifting through walls, no shared television, programs, no negotiating bathroom schedules or dinner timing. Just me and my thoughts and the soft sounds of a neighborhood settling into evening. I made tea in my small kitchen, Earl Grey that I'd bought because I liked it, not because it was on sale or because other people in the household preferred it. Small freedoms that felt enormous after years of collective decision-making. Carmen was parked on the street outside, visible from my living room window. She looked comfortable in the neighborhood, like she'd found her proper context. Classic cars belonged in places with character, surrounded by people who appreciated craftsmanship over convenience. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "How's the first night? Need anything?" "Perfect," I texted back. "Thank you for raising me to be ready for this." The response came immediately. "Thank you for teaching us that love means letting go at the right time." Work had changed too, though the changes were subtler than moving apartments. I'd reduced my hours at the cafe from full-time to part-time, keeping the job because I genuinely enjoyed it rather than because I desperately needed every dollar. The tutoring had evolved into something more substantial, a small business helping immigrant students navigate both academic content and cultural expectations. Emilio had been promoted to assistant manager, his artistic background bringing creative energy to what had been a purely functional workspace. We'd started spending time together outside of work, exploring San Diego's coffee culture, and discovering that shared interests could develop into something deeper when neither person was exhausted by multiple job obligations. "You seem different lately," he'd observed during one of our coffee shop tours. "More relaxed, but also more focused, like you figured out what you actually want instead of just responding to what you think you should want." The observation was accurate. For the first time in years, my decisions were driven by preference rather than necessity, by vision rather than survival. The shift had been gradual but profound, learning to ask, "What do I want?" instead of, "What do I need to do?" Bella and I had developed an actual friendship, rather than just coexisting as siblings. She'd started working part-time at a community center, discovering that her natural social skills translated well into youth programming. Our different approaches to life had become complementary rather than competitive. "I used to think you were judging me for not working as hard as you," she'd admitted during one of our sister coffee dates. "But now I realize you were just trying to figure out your own path, and I was taking it personally." "I was judging you," I'd replied honestly. "But not because there was anything wrong with your path. I was judging you because I thought there was only one right way to approach life, and it was the way I'd chosen. The conversation had been liberating for both of us. We could finally see each other as individuals, rather than as representatives of different approaches to family expectations. Sunday dinners had become more interesting with one fewer person living at home. I joined as a guest rather than as default, family labor, contributing dishes I'd chosen to make rather than automatically helping with whatever needed doing. The dynamic was more balanced, more intentional. "Mija, tell us about your week," Dad would say, treating my life as something worth reporting rather than something he already knew through proximity. These small shifts created space for real conversation, rather than just family maintenance. We could talk about books and politics and dreams, without the underlying tension of people who live together, but haven't necessarily chosen to spend time together. Grandma Lita had been the most philosophical about my move. "Families are like gardens," she'd said, helping me pack her recipe box contributions into a smaller container. "Some plants need more space to grow properly. Giving space isn't abandonment, it's cultivation." 3 months into apartment living, I'd established routines that felt authentically mine rather than adapted from family patterns. Morning coffee on my small balcony, evening walks through the neighborhood, weekend projects that could be completed without coordinating with other people's schedules. The freedom was both exhilarating and occasionally overwhelming. When you've spent years accommodating other people's needs and preferences, making decisions based purely on your own desires requires relearning how to trust your own judgment. Jordan and I met for coffee every Tuesday, comparing notes on our respective adventures in independent living. She was thriving in nursing school, her previous medical experience making coursework manageable, while giving her maturity advantages over traditional students. "Do you ever miss the chaos of living with family?" she asked during one of our weekly check-ins. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I miss it the way you miss a favorite song, with appreciation rather than longing. I can visit that chaos whenever I want, but I don't have to live in it anymore." Carmen had adapted to apartment living better than expected. Street parking required more vigilance than driveway security, but the neighborhood appreciated classic cars enough that she generated compliments rather than vandalism. Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 blocks away, had made a point of introducing herself and offering garage space during severe weather. "Beautiful car for a beautiful young woman," she'd said, running her hand along Carmen's hood with obvious appreciation. "Classic things require proper care, but they reward that care with lasting beauty." The observation applied to more than automobiles. Classic approaches to life, patience, persistence, attention to detail, created lasting satisfaction in ways that shortcuts couldn't replicate. My years of working multiple jobs hadn't been wasted effort. They'd been foundational training for approaching life with intention and appreciation. Winter in San Diego was mild enough that apartment living felt like a year-round blessing rather than a seasonal adjustment. My small space stayed comfortable without expensive heating bills, and the coastal location meant walking to work and errands rather than driving everywhere. Christmas that year was the first holiday I'd spent as an adult visitor rather than a child participant. I contributed homemade tamales to the family dinner, a recipe I'd learned from Mrs. Rodriguez and adapted to my own kitchen capabilities. The gift exchange was more balanced, with me giving thoughtful presents rather than whatever I could afford after paying for other people's wants. "This feels different," Bella observed while we cleaned up after dinner. "Like we're all adults now instead of parents and children." "Is that good or bad?" "Good, I think. More honest. Like we can choose to be here instead of being obligated to be here." The conversation continued as we finished the dishes. 2 sisters, who'd learned to appreciate each other's perspectives rather than competing for parental attention or approval. Our different approaches to life had become evidence of family diversity rather than family dysfunction. New Year's Eve found me hosting a small gathering in my apartment. Jordan, Emilio, a few neighbors, people who'd become chosen family rather than biological obligation. We cooked together, shared stories about the year's changes, made resolutions that felt realistic rather than aspirational. At midnight, I stood on my balcony looking out at the city lights, thinking about the distance between who I'd been 12 months earlier and who I was becoming. The young woman who'd worked 3 jobs to buy a dream car had evolved into someone who worked strategically to fund a dream life. Carmen was parked below, illuminated by streetlights that made her chrome gleam like jewelry. She was still beautiful, still mine, still a symbol of what persistence could accomplish. But now she was also transportation rather than destination, a tool for building the life I wanted rather than proof that I deserved one. My phone buzzed, with messages from family and friends, New Year's wishes and expressions of love that felt more meaningful because they were chosen rather than expected. Mom and Dad, checking that I was safe and happy. Bella, sharing photos from her own New Year's celebration. Grandma Lita, sending a voice message blessing that began, "May this year bring you everything your heart desires, and the wisdom to appreciate it." The blessing felt like a benediction on the year that had passed, and the year beginning. I'd learned to desire things worth having, and to appreciate what I'd been given, without taking it for granted. The balance between gratitude and ambition had finally stabilized into something sustainable. At 25, I was living a life that felt authentically mine rather than adapted from other people's expectations or limitations. The apartment was small but sufficient. The work was meaningful without being overwhelming. The relationships were chosen and maintained through mutual appreciation rather than proximity or obligation. Carmen had been the catalyst for changes I hadn't known I needed. Finding Miguel Jr.'s letter had forced conversations that revealed family dynamics none of us had fully understood. Learning about Mom's immigration story had provided context for values I'd inherited without understanding their origins. Moving into my own space had created distance necessary for choosing connection rather than accepting it as default. Some stories end with dramatic revelations or complete transformations. Others end with subtle shifts that accumulate into a life that fits better, feels more authentic, creates space for growth and change, and the ongoing process of becoming whoever you're meant to be. Standing on my balcony in the quiet minutes after midnight, watching my neighborhood settle into the new year, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete contentment with the present moment, combined with excitement about future possibilities. Not satisfaction that felt like ending, but satisfaction that felt like beginning. Carmen's keys were in my pocket alongside my apartment keys, symbols of different kinds of freedom that had combined into something larger than the sum of their parts. Independence earned rather than given, family relationships chosen rather than endured, work that supported life rather than consuming it. The American dream had always been described as upward mobility, more money, bigger house, better car, higher status. But maybe the real dream was horizontal mobility, the freedom to choose your own definitions of success, to build a life that reflected your values rather than other people's expectations, to love and be loved without losing yourself in the process. 25 was young enough for dreams and old enough for wisdom, the perfect age for beginnings that honored everything you'd learned while remaining open to everything you might discover. The perfect age for keys that opened doors you'd earned the right to walk through. In the morning, I'd make coffee in my small kitchen and plan the week ahead. But tonight I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by evidence of choices well made, looking forward to years of possibilities yet to be explored, grateful for family and friends, and the kind of independence that enhanced connection rather than replacing it. Sometimes the best endings are actually beginnings in disguise. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.